Nigel Quasi, Bruno Cheru, Eric Jemba. Those are just three central midfielders that we have been blessed to witness in the world of football during the 21st century. Hard as this may be to believe though, in today's video, we're going to take a look at 7 central midfielders who I think are or were even better than them. Now, before you start chastising me already, just wait and see who they are. As you will know by now if you are subscribed to the channel and have been following this series, and quite frankly, if you haven't, I don't know what on earth you are doing with your life and you should be embarrassed, we have been counting down the 7 greatest players in every position on a football pitch over the last 23 years. Not literally, like the greatest player right here in this exact position over the last 23 years. That would be silly, and we don't do silliness on this channel. But in each of the 10 main positions, namely goalkeeper, right back, centre back, left back, defensive midfield, central midfield, attacking midfield, right wing, left wing, and trequartista. No, not really. The last one will be centre forwards. I was just kidding when I said that we don't do silliness on this channel. I'm actually quite the joker. So far, I've already done goalkeepers, right backs, centre backs, left backs, and defensive midfielders, which can only mean one thing. No, not that my mum's right and this isn't a proper job. It means, of course, that today is the turn of the central midfielders. As I pointed out in the defensive midfield video, which, as we've established, you've all already seen unless you're complete idiots, so I don't know why I'm going over it again, sometimes it can be quite difficult to determine whether someone was predominantly a defensive or central midfielder. And that becomes even trickier with this 7, since there are contentious decisions in both directions, with players who some people would classify as defensive or attacking rather than central midfielders. Where possible, I've based my decision on where they actually played most of their football post-2000, but in instances in which that isn't possible, I'm afraid that it's just a bit of a vibe check. As always, the criteria is simply the quality and quantity of every single player's performances since Big Ben struck midnight to usher in the start of a new millennia at the beginning of the 2000s. Neither an incredible peak nor great longevity alone, therefore, will be enough to earn an inclusion. It is a combination of the two that is required, and it is all very, very scientific, so I doubt that there will be any disagreements with my selections in the comments. No, really, I would be very surprised. There will be some honourable mentions towards the end, but for now though, here are my absolutely inarguably and fact-driven 7 greatest central midfielders since 2000. 7th, Paul Scholes. This was the one video in this series that I was dreading more than any of the others, as was the case when I made a series on the greatest Premier League players in every position, and that is precisely because of the age-old Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes debate, which I find tedious beyond belief, and have made my life's mission to avoid engaging in other than when I make one of these videos, and that becomes impossible. Admittedly, if it really was my life's mission, I probably would have just picked a different job, but that's besides the point. These are 3 players, even the most recent of which retired over 7 years ago, that people are still arguing incessantly about how to order them or who was the best is just a spectacular waste of everyone's time, so to keep absolutely no one happy, I've ordered them completely differently to how I did in my video on the greatest ever Premier League midfielders, and I will explain why that is the case with the next inclusion, but for now, we'll just stick to why Paul Scholes is in 7th. The most talented of the trio, in my humble opinion, and neither Gerrard nor Lampard themselves would disagree with that assessment. Anyone who trained with, or played against Scholes was mesmerised by his ability with a ball at his feet. Never the most athletic, or the most tactful out of possession it should be said, when he had the ball, Scholes could pretty much do as he pleased. Early in his career, playing as a number 10 or even as a second striker at times behind Ruud van Nistelrooy, that meant playing lots of through balls and scoring plenty of goals. It is often forgotten that Scholes scored 20 goals in the 2002-03 season, and excluding penalties, of which he only ever took 3 and scored 3, Scholes had a better goals-to-game ratio than Gerrard. Later in his career, Scholes became Manchester United's midfield metronome, arguably becoming even more pivotal to Alex Ferguson as a deep-line playmaker, controlling games, dictating the tempo, and pulling the strings. How many cliches was that? Scholes was brilliant in both roles and had a wonderfully decorated career, winning 25 trophies, including 11 Premier League titles and 2 Champions Leagues. 9 of those 25 trophies came pre-2000 though, as did 5.5 years of Scholes' career, which just about holds him back from the upper echelons of this 7. But he still takes 7th, ahead of some brutal competition. 6th, Frank Lampard. Well, I alluded to it at the end there, but while Scholes featured ahead of Lampard in my Premier League's greatest series, and I do believe Scholes was a more gifted footballer than Lampard, in fact, I genuinely think that is pretty much inarguable, Lampard is younger than Scholes, and he played more games than either Scholes or Gerrard, quite a lot more in fact. Lampard racked up some 1,021 senior career appearances, compared to Gerrard's 863 and Scholes' 784. Lampard is also the single most productive central midfielder of the 21st century in terms of goals and assists, and by some distance too, having made a grand total of 467 goal contributions, and, as we all know, it should have been 468. There are world-class forwards who never manage to put up those kinds of numbers, but it would be crass to talk solely in terms of numbers and mathematics when dealing with a player of the calibre of Frank Lampard. It is sometimes said, particularly in the context of these Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes debates, that Lampard was a brilliant professional, got in the right place at the right time, and scored loads of goals. All of those things are undoubtedly true, of course, but it is just such a gross oversimplification. I have been to quite a lot of football matches, I'd hazard a guess and not far off 1,000, and one of the best all-round performances that I've ever witnessed live came courtesy of Frank Lampard. His touch, vision, awareness, weight of pass, and yes, of course, his eye for goal were all absolutely phenomenal. There were 5 seasons in which Lampard scored 20 or more goals and another in which he bagged 19. And in 2005, the year that Steven Gerrard inspired Liverpool to the Champions League, Lampard came second in Ballon d'Or voting, 1 place ahead of Gerrard, and only very narrowly trailing Ronaldinho. He was a phenomenal footballer who played the vast majority of his football post-2000, so for now we can overlook the fact that he said he had a lot of respect for David Cameron and George Osborne in 2014, after they'd already implemented a brutal programme of austerity that resulted in more than 300,000 estimated excess deaths, and stick him in 6th. 5th, Steven Gerrard. After saying that I hate the Gerrard-Lampard-Scholes debate, yes, I am aware that I've ordered them side by side as the first 3 inclusions in this 7, but based upon the criteria, that is just how they fell. Steven Gerrard, who I also ranked below Paul Scholes in my Premier League series, I think deserves to come out on top out of the 3 of them in the context of the 21st century. Gerrard is the youngest of the 3, 2 years younger than Lampard and 5 years younger than Scholes, which means that, unlike the other 2, pretty much his entire career came post-2000. Gerrard made 13 appearances in the 1998-99 season, but it was in the 1999-2000 season that he really announced himself to the world, breaking into the England team by the end of 2000. Arguably, and by that I mean that this is an argument that I would make, Gerrard is the most complete midfielder in this 7. A brilliant athlete, he could run, jump, shoot, tackle, head the ball, switch the play an intricate 1-2, cross the ball, burst past someone, and, of course, he was an inspirational leader and captain for the best part of 2 decades. He probably would have been half decent in goal had he have been asked to play there. Gerrard probably never would have been as lethal as Lampard, even in the same team and system, or quite as gifted in terms of dictating a game as Scholes, but he could have, and indeed on occasion did, perform both roles expertly, as well as making a pretty turgid Liverpool team at times highly competitive, being a talisman pretty much his entire career, and inspiring his boyhood club to the highest of highs, even during one of their lowest eras. Gerrard was as good at playing football as he is bad at managing, which is saying something because he is an utterly atrocious manager. So that's why he takes 5th. 4th, Luka Modric. Finally, at long last, just as the prophecy foretold, we escaped the tedious abyss of Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes discourse with a player who, I believe, post-2000 at least, is greater than all three. Luka Modric is 38 years old, yet he is still one of the best midfielders on the planet, and he played a whopping 52 games for Real Madrid last season. Either he is a medical marvel who really needs to be studied by scientists, or he is juiced up to the eyeballs on performance-enhancing drugs, and there is about to be a massive scandal a few years after he hangs up his boots. Just for now, we'll assume that he isn't football's answer to Lance Armstrong, and give him his dues. His dues, I said. Not his special juice, it is the club doctors who would administer that, were it the case, which, of course, I reiterate, I have absolutely no evidence or reason to believe that it is. A weedy and diminutive midfielder who honed his skills in the car park of a hotel housing refugees after his family fled the Yugoslav wars, Modric looks like a man who would be physically dominated in midfield, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Having made his name as a number 10 at Dinamo Zagreb and Tottenham Hotspur, Real Madrid signed Modric after a protracted transfer saga in the summer of 2012. And after his debut campaign at the Santiago Bernabeu, Spanish newspaper Marca picked him out as La Liga's worst signing of the season. That turned out to be one of the worst assessments in the entire history of football. In Madrid, Modric found a new home. I mean, literally I assume, but also on the pitch, playing as an 8 rather than as a 10 in a deeper role, where his energy and industry, combined with his vision and awareness, made him simply one of the most faultless and flawless footballers on the planet for the previous decade. Modric recently surpassed 1,000 senior appearances for both club and country, over 100 more than either Gerrard or Scholes ever managed, and soon to exceed Lampard. All post-2000, and he is still playing and excelling at the very highest level, even now. It's hard to see what more he could have done or accomplished, to be honest, or why he's only 4th, but I suppose it just comes down to the sheer genius of the 3 players up next. 3rd, Andrea Pirlo. I've recently seen Andrea Pirlo being described a couple of times as overrated, which I suppose could be true, assuming that people rate him as the greatest player of all time, much better than either Messi or Pelé, or something along those lines. Outside of that, I would suggest that it is quite difficult for Pirlo to be overrated. At his job, as a regista, as the Italians call it, operating from a central role in front of the defence, always looking to get on the ball and create from deep, there has been no one better in my lifetime. Pirlo made his name with his boyhood club Brescia, and he went on to star for Italy's 3 biggest clubs, Juventus, AC Milan, and Inter Milan. Inter's decision to sell Pirlo to their fiercest rivals for 33 billion lira, which is about 17 million euros, in 2001 must be among the worst decisions that the club has ever made. Though AC Milan's decision to only offer Pirlo a 1-year extension on his contract a decade later, because he was over the age of 30, was almost as daft. Pirlo turned down the 1-year deal and joined Juventus, where he proceeded to win 4 Scudettos in 4 seasons as the club's main man, racking up 164 appearances. Pirlo was a genius both in and out of possession, blessed in the subtle art of being able to dummy players and wriggle free of them without so much as thinking about it, and then in the less subtle art of playing some of the most sublime passes that you have ever seen. Pirlo played significantly fewer games than Modric, won fewer trophies, though he still won 2 Champions Leagues and a World Cup, and he played 3.5 seasons of football pre-2000. But still, his influence on the sport has been greater than probably any other player in this 7. He was as gifted as they come, and I couldn't forgive myself if he didn't make the podium, even based upon the stated criteria. 2nd, Andres Iniesta. One of the most entertaining players of my lifetime at least, pretentious or as presumptuous as this may sound, and it sounds very, If you don't enjoy watching Andres Iniesta, whatever the context, I'm not sure that football is the sport for you. A graduate of the La Masia youth ranks, Iniesta made his Barcelona debut at the age of 18, back when he still had hair, but it took him a little bit of time to get going in the senior game. He didn't even make his international debut, for instance, until the age of 22, and even then, only after he was a surprise call-up to Spain's 2006 World Cup squad. The fact that Iniesta scored the winning goal in the final of the following World Cup, and went on to win 131 caps despite his late start, probably tells you how the rest of his career went. At club level, Iniesta soon became the star of arguably the greatest midfield trio of all time under Pep Guardiola, going on to play almost 700 games for Barcelona, where he won 31 trophies, including 9 La Liga titles and 4 UEFA Champions Leagues. Iniesta played and continues to play predominantly in central midfield, hence his inclusion in this 7, but far from exclusively, also featuring in attacking midfield and fairly frequently wide on the left. Iniesta actually started his career in defensive midfield, but his skill and composure were correctly identified as being best put to use higher up the pitch, where he was near enough impossible to dispossess, and made threading the ball through the eye of a needle, after spotting a pass that no one even up in the stands could see, look as though it were second nature. Iniesta is still playing now, would you believe it, aged 39, having recently joined a club that you've never heard of called Emirates in the UAE, following 5 whole years and 134 appearances for Vissel Kobe in Japan. Iniesta's later years have very little bearing on where he ranks in this 7. He did his heavy lifting at Barca, but it is impressive longevity all the same. 0. Honourable mentions. I won't bore you by naming every player who made the shortlist for this 7, and I'll instead restrict myself only to those who nearly featured, or who likely require some justification as to why they didn't. Zinedine Zidane, for instance, is arguably the greatest central midfielder to have played during the 2000s, but is nowhere to be found. That's because Zizou retired from football entirely in 2006, and as good as he was between 2000 and 2006, no one has yet featured in this series off the back of just 6 years of football, and given the criteria, no one is likely to in the future, and I think that it would be not only a little disrespectful, but downright dishonest to suggest that Zidane did more in his roughly 300 appearances post-2000 than the likes of Gerrard, Lampard or Scholes did in more than twice that number of games, even if he was more gifted and enjoyed a far greater peak than any of those 3. The 5 midfielders who came closest to featuring were Clarence Seedorf, Cesc Fabregas, Toni Kroos, Yaya Touré and Michael Ballack, all of whom, in my view, could go toe-to-toe with the 3 Englishmen who first featured. Ballack, in particular, had he not played a good few years of football before 2000, or retired earlier than some of the others at 35, having already regressed a little during his time at Chelsea and his second stint at Bayer Leverkusen, would undoubtedly have featured. Once again, his peak, between 2000 and 2005, was as good as, if not even better than, pretty much anything that anyone in this 7 produced, not just Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes. Similarly, Yaya Touré at his best was an absolute freak who could do it all, and looked to be playing a different sport at times, and were we considering peaks alone he would undoubtedly have featured. Seedorf was a marvel with practically no technical, physical or mental faults, aside from the occasional bout of inconsistency. Kroos is like Paul Scholes' heir apparent on a football pitch, and Fabregas would have been a shoo-in had he not tailed off around the age of 31. Even then, it is worth bearing in mind that he is one of the greatest teenage footballers of all time, and had made a tremendous number of appearances and become a star man at Arsenal before most players have even been promoted to the reserves. Elsewhere, shout-outs go to the likes of Ivan Rakitic, Torsten Frings, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Marco Verratti, and Juan Sebastian Veron. But for a variety of different reasons, it was always going to be an uphill battle for any of them to sneak in. Before I leave you, wonderful people though, there is of course still time for the small matter of top spot. First, Xavi. I don't want to say that it was an easy decision to put Xavi in first place, because you are talking about competition in the form of Luka Modric, Andrea Pirlo, and his old comrade at Barcelona, Andres Iniesta. No one is good enough to comfortably see off competition of that calibre, but all I will say is that Xavi was my favourite to take top spot before I drafted this 7, and the more I researched, rewatched and thought about it, the more confident that I became that that was the right decision. Like Iniesta, Xavi was a graduate of La Masia who made his Barcelona debut at 18, but unlike Iniesta, he looked immediately at home. Long touted for stardom, an injury to Pep Guardiola saw Xavi propelled into regular first-team action, and in his debut campaign, he made 26 appearances and won the La Liga Breakout Player of the Year award. Guardiola never won back his place at Barca, and actually never really recovered from that setback, but he didn't hold grudges, and when he took over at Barca in 2008, as good as Xavi already was, he reached yet new heights. Basically an even better version of Guardiola, Xavi was Pep's dream player, and the most important player in his all-conquering Barcelona team over the next 4 years, after Lionel Messi. Xavi was better than any other player that I've ever seen at constantly making himself available to the man in possession. His ability to drift into space, provide players with an option, and to know, before anyone else, exactly what he was going to do if or when he received the ball was pivotal to everything that made Barcelona the best team in the world and, in some people's eyes, the best of all time. In total, Xavi made 945 appearances at club level, 767 of them in the Barcelona first team, as well as winning 133 caps for Spain. He won La Liga 8 times, the Champions League 4 times, the Euros twice, and the World Cup once. Xavi was denied a Ballon d'Or by Messi and Ronaldo, but in 2020, France Football named him in their Ballon d'Or 11, their dream team consisting of the greatest players of all time, where he featured alongside Lev Yashin, Cafu, Franz Beckenbauer, Paolo Maldini, Lothar Matthäus, Diego Maradona, Pele, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima. It is a horribly unbalanced team if we are being honest, but I agree with their assessment of Xavi, who, rightly in my view, tops this 7. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on both for this channel and also my second channel, both of which should be on or about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all 3, and all of those links and other nonsense should be down in the video description below. Cheers.